Hi, I'm Dvora Kresniansky from Adai Ad, and welcome to the next episode of Your Strong Relationship. Here I speak with author and therapist Chana Levitan about her new book, Are We There Yet? It's practical and insightful about this one thing for successful marriage. After so many years of therapy and coaching, Chana concluded that the one thing for successful marriage is differentiation. And she breaks it down in this conversation, the stages of a marriage, the roadblocks so many of us hit as we discover and live by the concept of differentiation. So, what is differentiation? It's the ability to maintain my sense of self as I discover how different my spouse and I are, while at the same time learning to stay connected. So, there's lots of practical advice here and in her new book. So, here we go. So I'm really excited to talk to you, Chana, about your new book. It's not your first book, and so I read your other books, and I really appreciated those. And this is another angle, so I'm excited to talk about it and share it with everybody. But before we even talk about the book, let's talk a little bit about you and the work that you've been doing for a very long time in this space of relationships and marriage and dating.
Yes, thanks, Dora. It's such a pleasure to have this time with you and with your listeners. Just to sum up what I've been doing over the past 30 years, I've been working with couples. I started out doing a lot more in the dating realm, and that led me to my first book, I Only Want to Get Married Once. Then doing more couples work and more couples work, then published Oh, That's Why I Married You, which is a book based on research, really looking at different differences, various differences that couples have. There are 10 most common differences that I found in my research. For example, spender saver, organized, not so organized, introvert, extrovert, etc. And from there, I was hearing more and more stories and getting a sense that what people really need is real life stories, people talking about the real stuff, not the fluffy Hollywood, oh wow, marriage, and not the dredges of, ugh, I don't even know how to do marriage, but the people who are willing to talk about how they got through really tough times and created beautiful, thriving marriages. So I said that's what people need. People need the whole process. And over the course of many years, I was using the differentiation techniques of Ellen Bader, and she's got some beautiful techniques that really combine differentiation and attachment, which is really, I think, the secret there, that how to use both of those together. And as I was using these techniques with more and more couples, I was just seeing breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough. And I said, okay, got to write a book about these techniques, these ideas out there. But once I started to try to in a very concise way sum up what differentiation was and with a combination of attachment, I realized it's getting a little too academic and complicated. And I said, I don't like to write books like that. I like my books to be really clear and easy to grasp. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to write about differentiation exactly. I'll interview couples. People need to hear couples and see couples. But every single couple, Dora, it was unbelievable. Every couple was referring to differentiation as their key, as their secret to success. And I said, okay, I've got to do this. I've got to write about this. I've got to figure out how to really simplify it so that every person, either academic or not, trained in psychology or not, could really grasp it. So, thank God, over the course of years of really breaking my head over it, I think I got it down to a nice, clear, enjoyable read.
An
And
easy read.
yeah, I like my stuff to be, easy, even though it's
It's deep but
educational.
easy.
Yeah, deep and easy. So yeah, that's really what came out of the writing. 18 couples sharing their stories, and each one of them could have gotten divorced, and each one of them crashed in whatever way they crashed, and each one of them pushed through to incredible marriages. So yeah, it's real. There's no fluff there. It's the beauty of marriage. It's the painful process of going through change, and the reason why it's so worth it. I think that that's something that people lose track of. I think singles here, marriage is so much work, and sometimes as married folks, we're in the different stages and we lose the focus of where we're heading. So the idea is to really give this as a roadmap, wherever we are along the way, to really normalize the process and to give tips and tools to get through the dips and to really to create, our own beautiful marriage.
And now we have the book. Are we there yet? So I love
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the metaphor of the roadmap
Mm,
and the way it's so clearly written. And so I want to hope that we can take it apart a little bit of like kind of what the model is. But first, let's talk about what did we say the word differentiation? What are we even talking about?
hmm. Yeah. Well, differentiation is so important because when we get close to another person, right, there's a tendency to lose ourselves in that person or to try to control them and mold them, or to need a lot of space, which is not what closeness is all about. So I think every person, healthy person on the planet, wants closeness and wants intimacy. And I think that every person on this planet is also afraid of real intimacy, of real emotional closeness. That's just a human reality. As much as we want it, it's scary. And in order to really to grow, right, what we need to do, and grow, I mean relationally, is that we need to learn when we get into a relationship to hold on to ourselves, to maintain who we are as we start to discover how different our spouse is. Now, what usually happens when we start to discover how different our spouse is, oh no, I can't be close to this person. They think so differently. They feel differently. They don't even like the people I like. And we get thrown off. And then, okay, now I have to change him, right? Or I'm not okay. Or like this can't be happening because my marriage was supposed to make me happy. Why isn't my marriage making me happy? Right. And so there's all these different reactions, and then oftentimes that leads to withdrawal or cut off and all of that. So differentiation is the ability to maintain my sense of self as I discover how different my spouse and I are, and then learn to maintain the closeness. Okay. So yeah, it's not just working on oneself. It's in a sense it's developing and maintaining oneself and working on oneself for the purpose of closeness in the relationship. So it's both, and it's I am getting in touch with myself and building myself, I'm regulating myself, and I'm learning how to bring that beautiful self of who I am into this relationship with this other beautiful person. And now, how not to lose myself, how not to need to change him and blame him, but rather to regulate myself and to learn how to do the dance of marriage with this other person who is so different, but so wonderful.
And I love how you talk about the five different stages of the marriage. You come in thinking that we're so alive and we're so invested. And let's walk through the five stages because I think that's such an important premise of the book, and it's such an important premise of what all relationships go through. And I think that basic awareness of just knowing that this is going to happen and it's supposed to happen, and it's not
Mm,
a bad thing, it will happen. I mean, for some people, a little bit
yeah,
longer, a little bit shorter, a little bit
yeah,
it hits them harder, maybe, but it's how relationships get from not knowing each other to actually really being close.
right, right, right. So, what I like to do rather than just mention the five stages is give through an example of a couple, right? What happened with this couple. So it just makes it a little bit more real, right? So the example of Josh and Rachel, who they got married, it was so great. It was so great in the beginning. Uh, And I'll just read a little bit from what they said. So Rachel said, I heard about Josh from three different people in my life. It was uncanny. What struck me was that when these people would mention his name, they had a little twinkle in their eye, and it was clear that people just loved him. So when my friend suggested that I date him, I was totally into it. And the first thing I noticed when we met is that I felt so calm and comfortable with him, which was the opposite of how I felt with every other guy I had dated. And I tend to be a very emotional person. And when I dated those other guys, I just wasn't myself around them. So I was often stuck overthinking. But with Josh, it was the opposite. He was so human, so normal, so real. It just being with him felt so safe, and he was funny and he's smart, right? And he was so much fun. We always had so much fun together. It was just really easy. And Josh says, yeah, and I was crazy about Rachel from the get-go, and she's very warm. And of course, it helped that she was always laughing at my jokes. And I'm a very logical, calculated guy. Therefore, I tend to be someone who thinks everything out. And she seemed like a well thought out, balanced woman. We had the same values, which was huge. And it was clear that she was into family. So everything just made sense. And Rachel says, when we were dating, Josh was the most communicative, connective person. Every date he would lead the conversation. He'd say, I was thinking about what I said last time, and he was very specific with his words. He made sure that he really communicated. And that felt so reassuring to me. But when we got married, he wasn't communicative at all. And he was just one big ball of logic. And when I asked Josh about this a couple of months into our marriage, this is how our conversation went. Rachel, why don't you talk to me the way you used to when we were dating? Josh, I'm not that type. Rachel, but when we were dating, you were that type. Josh says, I was just doing that so that you should know who I am. In other words, Rachel says he was reviewing everything he said because he didn't want to misrepresent himself. But the fact that he was reviewing everything he said made him seem like the type of person that's very connective. So when I realized he's actually not connective at all, I felt really nauseated. And on some level, at this point, we had to start at square one. And then Josh says, yeah, I think square one's a pretty good way to describe it. On my end, about 3 months into our marriage, Rachel came back from the store really upset. When I asked her what happened, she said that the salesman had yelled at her for no reason, and it totally freaked her out. So now he says, my mother, my sister, they're really warm, but they're not particularly emotional. So I wasn't used to this, and I was a bit confused. And when I asked her why she got so upset, she said, I'm just an intensely emotional woman. And I said to myself, no, can't be. There's no way I would marry an intensely emotional woman.
Mhm.
And Rachel laughed. She says, well, I think over the years, Josh got to see a whole other level of emotional. And I think at first he was in a state of shock, right? So this is what, the first stage when we're dating, it's what we call fusion. Everything's like, oh, it's so easy, it's so great, it's so, right? And the second stage is the wake up, right? Wait a minute. What? I can't believe it. And now this is a pretty extreme example of a wake up. Most of us don't have such like extreme examples, but many, we all do have our surprises. And when we do get surprised, and that is when we kick into what I call the roadblocks. And I alluded to them earlier. There's four main roadblocks, and we all do at least one of them. Some of us do all four, right? So it's number one, I got to change my spouse. I'm going to blame him for what's going on. Number two, blame myself. I'm not okay. And then it's like self-condemnation. Number three, dependence. You were supposed to make me happy. How come you're not making me happy? Marriage was supposed to solve my problems. Why isn't that happening? And number four, withdrawing or cutting off. Okay, so these are typically the ways that we all will react to these differences. And again, that has a lot to do with the fact that as kids, as children, who is our best friend? The person who is most like us, the most similar to us. Because kids do not know how to negotiate differences. They can't. They don't have the brain capacity to hold two different opinions or two different experiences. So they have to be with someone who's just like them, right? Like when I flew to the States for my book tour, last month. It was we landed in Northern California, and I went for initially with my daughter and her baby, and I went for a week with family, and then I started my 3-week book tour. So we landed, and it was a Khamsin. It was really hot in Israel when we landed, and so my grandson, right, calls his mom, my daughter. She says, "It's so hot. Aren't you hot?" And she's like, "No, actually, in Northern California, it's cold. It's pretty cold." He said, "No, no, 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 it's hot." She said, "No, it's cold here." He said, "It can't be. It's hot." So she said, "No, it's hot for you in Israel, and it's cold for us in California." He said, "No, that can't be." And he could not grasp that there would be two different realities, right? Because a child's brain can't do that. As we mature, we're able to hold to realities, and that is what emotional intimacy is all about. That's what emotional maturity is all about. It's about being able to hold two opposing ideas at the same time and to still feel close, right? So that's really what happens when we hit the roadblocks is that young part of us takes over. It's like, what? You don't think like me. You don't feel like me. Get out of here. Or, I have to change you. Like, this is crazy. No, I didn't sign up for this. Yeah. And so that's when marriage gets painful. And yeah, you're gonna,
So with that, so we had first the fusion, and then
yeah.
stuff.
hmm So and then we crash, right? We all crash a little bit. Okay. It's part of being human. Now, once we realize that this is not working, our roadblocks are crashing us, then we have the options of differentiation tools and techniques. So this is stage three. Stage three is differentiation. Instead of blaming and trying to change my spouse, what we do is we change ourselves. We regulate ourselves, right? We take responsibility for our own behavior and our own feelings. Okay. And that's again, that's obviously a lifelong process of getting great at this, but it begins with an ownership and understanding that we need to do this, and we need to find each one of us tools to help us to do this. Okay, and in the book, I delineate lots and lots of tools that we can use. We can also find tools online. Each one of us needs a tool bag of tools to help ourselves emotionally regulate, self-regulate, because we can't be close to someone if we're all over the place, right? I always say, we can't get along with someone else if we're not getting along with ourselves. And if we're not able to regulate ourselves on some level, and that means we all will get thrown off our game. We have to have these tools to help us calm down our limbic system, our fight or flight system, and get into a place of more equilibrium. Okay, so that's what the first differentiation path is a commitment to finding ways to help ourselves to self-regulate. And really the kindest thing we could ever do in a relationship, the nicest thing we could ever do, is to regulate ourselves, right? Because when uh, you've got one person, and I'm giving you an ex description, an example of this with my hands. Obviously, if people are listening on audio, they can't see this. But well, if you got, like, say, you know what? I'll give you an example of a tuning fork. Okay. Theoretically, if you've got a huge tuning fork that's very strong, right? And it's reverberating at a certain note, and you bring another tuning fork at the same note close to it, it'll start also the second one will start reverberating. It'll sort of catch the frequency, the reverberations. Okay, so what that means is that when we're close in a relationship, it's a very good example of what happens to us when if we're angry and then our spouse comes close to us, right? It can be very contagious, right? If our spouse is anxious and then we get close, we can catch the anxiety. And differentiation means that we're working on ourselves so that we can, when our spouse is anxious, we can get close and hold on to ourselves and say, hey, I'm here for you. What's going on? Right? If her spouse is angry, even at us, right? You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to, right? We can hold on to ourselves. And again, through our breathing exercises, all of our different tools, hey, I want to hear you. I see that you're upset. I really want to hear you. And it's really hard for me to hear you when you're like yelling at me. So can we maybe take a break or figure out another way to do that? Okay. So again, these are all again tools and methods of self-regulation that we're all wanting to constantly be working on. It's not like you got them in your pocket and then you're good to go. We're going to constantly be triggered, but the more we work on them, the better we get, and that's when our relationships really take off. Okay, our marriage and every other relationship we have, whether it's with the children or our parents or our friends or our coworkers or our boss, right? Marriage is the playing field upon which we build these muscles, and then they are going to affect the way we these muscles that we build in marriage will affect every other relationship that we have. So yeah, so that's the first.
I heard someone once say we only have one prefrontal cortex. Whatever happens, and if you build it in one area of your life, it spills over to the rest of your life.
Nice. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
So if
Yeah.
marriage is a real playing sandbox or playground or whatever
Yeah.
and you kind of forced to play or not, or you fall apart. And so that
Yeah,
really impacts the rest of your life in all areas.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's like I compare it to it's like the double win of marriage, it's like you're working on whatever we need to work on for our marriage, our stuff that we need to work out for ourselves. Right? So when we're doing the work of marriage, it's a double win, right? We're growing into the best person we want to be, and then our marriage is also flourishing. And I compare it to, planting a garden that sprouts in two places. So, people talk about the work of marriage. It is work, but it's the most profound, beautiful work. And the rewards are huge. I think the most profound rewards that we can imagine is what we get from marriage, and then our kids reap the benefits of that.
And not only our kids, it's really everything around us.
Everything. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. And certainly we need that today, these days, in this crazy world. Yeah. We need, right.
So we hit the recognition of differentiation, and then what happens? We got to
Well,
stage three, is that
that was
right?
just, well, that was one of the tools of differentiation. There's four different paths, right? So the first one we said, instead of changing our spouse, we're changing ourselves. We're regulating ourselves. Number two, instead of self-condemnation, self-blame, women are notorious at this one, right? It's all my fault. It's all blah, 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 blah. And then we get into martyr mode and the whole thing. And then we burn ourselves out. So it's self-validation. And of course, it's nice when our spouse validates us, but the validation has to start from within ourselves, right? And learning how to really build that beautiful self-validation muscle. And again, in my book, I give all sorts of tools and examples. Number three, instead of dependency, you're supposed to make me happy. Marriage is supposed to make me happy. It's, oh, wow. Um, I'm supposed to, no one can make me happy, right? We can't make anyone else happy, right? I just got a beautiful email from this guy who said, he just wanted to say that he found my book and it just clarified for him. He said him and his wife were in this cycle of, it was so heavy because each one of them thought they're supposed to make the other person happy, and they kept like pulling each other down and pulling each other down. He said, "Oh," and then I realized, "Oh, like I got to make myself happy." And he said, when I started to do that, I had so much more to give my wife instead of coming to her and thinking she's supposed to make me happy. So, yeah, they figured it out in half a year of their marriage. That's pretty impressive. It usually takes a lot longer, but it's
There's books
such a
like yours
common.
out there.
What?
Well,
Sorry?
finally, there's books like yours
Yeah.
out there.
Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. When you write a book, you say thank God because it really is coming through you. So I want to give credit where credit's due, right?
Right.
The fourth roadblock, again, as I said, is when we see the differences, especially those of us listening to podcasts who are more avoidantly attached. So it's as soon as we see something we don't like, it's run away. And so, again, instead of that, we learn to self-soothe and to then uh, find a way to communicate and find a way to bring ourselves to the relationship. And so, yeah, again, so these are the four pathways, and we don't have to get each one of them down. It's just as long as we're working on each, whatever our roadblock is, and we're able to have more differentiation, then we get to stage 4, right, in the on the road, right, the fourth stage in the road trip, which is acceptance and curiosity. Right now, I can accept you even though I don't really like what you just said, and I don't agree with your opinion about this and that and the other. That's okay. I accept you. And now that I accept you, I can be curious about why you think that way, that I don't agree with, but I can be curious about it, right? I can be curious about you and your whole process. That opens up worlds and that opens up space. And now this relationship is so much more, it's richer. It's filled with ideas and openness and two people really offering each other something so unique. And then the fifth stage is an enduring love, right? Which is we're deeply connected, yet we're so different. And that really is the reward of understanding, giving up the hope that we're going to change our spouse and allow ourselves to feel deeply connected to someone who's so different from ourselves, right? And then once we get to, the more enduring love, then we also go through different stages together as a couple. So our kids get older and we get tested in this way. So we work on our differentiation tools even more so, right? Because now all of a sudden we're in debt and we had to make a wedding or like someone in like one of our parents isn't feeling well and now there's all this new pressure. So then we work on our self-regulation. We work on not withdrawing. Like and as we do that, each time that we become more differentiated, we become our love becomes deeper and more profound. So this is the road trip. It's a beautiful trip. And if we understand the layout and the map, then when times get challenging, and they will, there are times where it's like, whoa, it's challenging, just like there's times in our personal lives where things are challenging, and we know that if we push through, when we push through, we get to the next, whoa, this is amazing, right? I never would have gotten to this breakthrough in my personal growth if I didn't go through that dip, through that little crash. And so too with a couple, we go through the times, we go through struggles, and we have our breakthroughs. But as we go through different struggles, what happens is we put more asphalt on the and cement on the ground, and it becomes the ride becomes smoother. And with time, with years, as a couple works through their stuff and builds, yes, marriage becomes easier and a lot less work.
So it sounds like once you get to stage 3, the awareness of the differentiation, you don't really go back to 1 and 2 anymore. Like that's
Correct.
over the hump.
Correct.
And now we just
Yeah.
go round and round in 3, 4, and 5, and a lot of
Yeah.
5, hopefully, but then
Yeah.
3
Yes.
and 4, and
Yes.
then more of
Yeah.
5, a deeper 5, sort of. But I think that the aware, like I love your metaphor of the asphalt, because I think awareness is a nice thick layer of asphalt to start off with. Just the awareness that this is how this is going to happen, and this is how you can navigate through it. Not necessarily at first your exact self-regulation tools and what's going to work for you and what's going to work for you in different situations, because I think that let's say deep breathing works for you sometimes, but it doesn't work for you always. So having a set of tools, not just
Mm,
one tool.
yeah.
And I think,
Exactly.
and I think that as women, and maybe this book is also for, I believe it's for men. I don't think it was written only for women. I didn't capture that.
No, not at all. All my books are very male friendly. I write them with the intention that guys, because they're not fluffy books, and guys read them.
And that's what I love about the readability. Some guys don't. Some guys love the deep, and some guys want to just get the point without the whole deep. So it's just an easy read, but it's profound. And if you read it a second time, you see the profundity, you see like the real value in it. It's simple, but deep.
Ah, yeah.
And it sparks a curiosity for those who really like to go down rabbit holes. There's lots of rabbit holes you can go to on the internet afterwards. But that's what I love about it, is that gentle awareness that this is what's going to happen, and here's what to do. Not the only what to do, but what to do. And that's what I love, that sense of the way you wrote it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. I really appreciate that. And I do want to add that when you said, okay, so, getting to we don't really go in terms of the road trip. I just want to mention one thing that, yeah, we don't go back to the fusion stage, right? We also don't go back to the wake up in terms of the first wake up. But if we're not careful, we'll keep hitting those roadblocks. And we will at times fall into the roadblocks. Then we have to remind ourselves, oh, here I go again. I'm trying to change my spouse. Okay, I'm stuck in blame, right? We're human, and it is so easy to blame, and it is so futile to blame. It is such a, when we blame our spouse, it's so sweet when for us, it's like, why do we do that so easily? Because it lets us off the hook. If my spouse is not okay, I don't have to, I'm okay. And I don't have to work on myself because, he's such a, he's such an idiot. So like, why do I have to work on myself? It lets us off the hook from working on ourselves. And so there is that human tendency to just want to keep getting stuck in blame or, needing to change. And I think it's important, and I want to put this out here, to really have compassion with ourselves and understand that, yeah, there's always that young part of us that just wants our spouse to think like us and to feel like us. And it doesn't go away. It's just that we mature that part so that it starts to realize, oh, it's not real. It's not realistic. And that younger part of us can really then appreciate the beautiful mature growth and love that we're able to experience, not in spite of our differences, but really because of them.
So is a big piece of the differentiation, and there's almost like there's a value to it. It's like our world expands when we have another perspective.
Oh,
And
totally,
I mean, just on a
totally.
very simple level, if your vacation styles are different, then you may actually start and you say you like cities and culture, and he likes hiking, or the other way around, and you just are introduced to a whole new style of vacationing, and maybe you can compromise into half a week and half a week, or half a day and half a day, or something like that. But I think that it opens our world, and I'm specifically using a simpler example just as a entry point to the whole idea of being introduced to and expanding our world by being introduced to somebody else's perspectives. And it
Mm,
doesn't have to be my way or the way my family used to do it, but a whole new our way, or sometimes the way you like it. I don't even like to call it my way or your way. Sometimes it's your preference and my preference, and we can do it sometimes the way you prefer. But my way already starts sounding like too possessive. It's like clashing
right,
almost. Again,
right.
I'm a word nerd, so words really are
Mm,
stick very
nice.
strongly. But I don't like the my way, your way
Yeah, yeah,
connotation.
yeah, yeah. My sense of what's comfortable and or my expertise also. I sometimes think of when uh, when I first got married. So we're married for over 36 years, and when my dad growing up, when I was growing up in our home, like he was an eye surgeon, he was a doctor, but he never knew how to fix things, right? So if anything broke, I mean, he could like change a light bulb, but I think that's pretty much where it began and ended. And my husband fixes everything, right? And I was at first I was like, whoa, it's just like it's that wow, I think the first time I saw him lying underneath our car I was a little bit like, whoa, wait a minute, like I wasn't used to that, but now I love it. And the concept of fixing things was completely foreign to me. But after 36 years of being, in this beautiful relationship with him and watching him fix things, when something breaks and he's not around, I will look at it and see if I could figure it out because I've just watched him do that. And it's like we can borrow our spouse's strengths. I certainly a lot of like he's a very methodical thinker, and I've absorbed a lot of that. I remember when we were dating, and at one point I was like, "Gosh, my brain hurts," because he's very really thought out, and all these years, I think my books are very much an expression of the methodical way that, I've sort of absorbed his ability to, not fully, obviously, but some of it. And he has also absorbed my more creative, laid back energy, and we're both able to give each other that gift, or, you know, absorb that gift. And we're able to do that also. Again, what is differentiation? It's like I'm holding on to myself and I'm open to you, right? And when we don't have to worry about losing ourselves, then we can learn from the other person. Then we can be curious, right? Because I'm not afraid he's going to mold me. I'm not afraid I'm going to lose myself. I can hold on to myself and take what I relate to, and then what I don't relate to, not take, right? So that's when marriage becomes so interesting, right? And it takes time for us to get there. So, it's really like this expertise, marriage. Marriage is an expertise that as we get better and better at it, it gets better if we're doing it right, right? We're able um to expand. And as you said, it's an expansive experience.
So I'm wondering if we were dating and we just knew that we were going to be different. Not that we should necessarily look out, but but if we were dating and we knew that we're going to see that we're different, would that even be a crash? It would just be, oh, so that's what they were talking about. Okay, here we are. And if we were
Yeah.
curious all along and open and accepting all along, would it even feel like a crash?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think about it a lot when I teach these ideas to singles. And I think that um, it definitely can help, but not there not being such a like with this Josh and Rachel, it was such a shock, right? And the more learned, the more educated we are, it doesn't have to be a crash. I still think that realistically, it's still difficult for us when we see someone who's different from ourselves. And I think we all have to go through that process of letting go, letting our younger parts like accept that, oh, we're not the same. Oh, it's not going to be this easy kind of thing. And then when our younger parts start to let go of that and realize that actually something better can happen, so then we can move forward. And so in that sense, I think we can avoid the crash if we understand that it's a normal thing to be annoyed by our differences, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Right. The crash really happens when we're fighting it. It's like, no, no, you have to think like me. No, how did I get into this? Right. There's something wrong here. It's not okay. No, it's nothing wrong. It's part of the process.
So we're talking about like if when we get to this point and you see that we are different, whether it's like a few months in or 18 months or whatever the different models say, you have up to 18 months before or all the different models, but some of your couples in your book were like 30 years in, or
Yeah.
and
40, 44, 46.
wow. Uh, so what happened, like what was going on for them until then? Were they just kept butting heads, or was one of them maybe trying to change themselves a little and the other one didn't really capture that? Like what was happening?
Some of the couples in the book, they figured it out, relatively quickly. Some it took longer. There's one couple in the book where it took them 20 something years, 28 years. They're on the verge of divorce, and they never met the concept of working on themselves, and they didn't understand what marriage was, and their parents had terrible marriages. They never, yeah, so they were just going on, what the movies really it was supposed to look like from the movies, right? And for them, uh they had done everything. They had finished the whole divorce process except for one little piece of it. And one night he went to sleep. The husband, they were living separately at this point in the different places in the house. And he had just woke up in the middle of the night and he just had this moment of like a wake up call, right? In the every sense of the word, pun intended. And he's like, what am I doing? Where am I going? How could I, like, that he just woke up sweating with this sense of like, wait a minute, have I looked at myself? Have I done the inner work? Have I even examined myself? Why am I blaming her for everything? And as soon as he did that, he started to look at her differently, and she was also going through a little bit of not a similar process, but it's a slightly she was softening a bit. And he said, "Hey, can we talk?" And he said, "I really take responsibility for my stuff. I'm sorry that I've been blaming you for everything." And it really blew her away. And she said, she started to take responsibility for her stuff, and
And they're
the rest
living
is history. There, yeah.
happily. So what if only one of them is doing the work and the other one just totally is still blaming or just checked out? Can this really work? This whole idea of differentiation. Obviously, they're very different. The differences is there, but I'm talking more to the work rather than only the concept of differentiation.
Well, it's interesting because I work as a marriage therapist and I've seen so many different types of couples coming in. And oftentimes it's one person who wants to do the work, one person who's willing to really face things. And sometimes the other person won't come in and do the work, or they'll come in and they're just sort of goofing off a bit. It takes one person to create significant change in a marriage as long as the other person is not abusive, as long as the other person is not totally out to lunch. Okay, if the other person is out to lunch, there's no one, there's no partner there, um, you can't really, it's not a marriage. Okay, now sometimes in those situations, people would decide it's better to stay married for economic reasons or for the kids or whatnot. I mean, every couple has to come up, to their own decisions and agreements and weigh up the, cost benefit analysis there. But besides for those more extreme examples, usually in each marriage, one person is more growth oriented, one more marriage oriented, more like let's keep working on the relationship. And as long as one person is doing that work and moving forward, the other person is usually catches on in some way or other, right? And I give examples in the book of this where I have a neurodivergent couple who, she was really doing a lot of the work. He didn't understand really what the work was. But he was a good guy, right? It wasn't like he wasn't I mean, there were times where he was yelling because he would lose, he would have meltdowns and whatnot. But but they loved each other very deeply. It's just he wasn't growing and he wasn't even aware of the emotional growth. So she kept working on herself and she kept growing. And then you see how as she was growing, he he was affected by her growth and then he also grew. So it's really fascinating because marriage is like a dance. And when one partner says, okay, that's it, I'm changing, I'm growing, I have to work on me for me right now, right? I don't know if my partner's going to come along and do his work or, or her work, but I'm going to do my work. And that is really, I would say, the secret to really to a successful marriage that each one of us has to say, I have to do my work. I have to work on me. And whatever it is that's coming up in my personality, in my habits and whatnot, I've got to do me. I've got to work on me. And when a person does take that full ownership of oneself, that is when the magic happens, right? And it usually, uh, it might take a year, it might take even a few years to catch on. I mean, marriage is a long process, right? But as long as one person is really secure and decisive in their growth process, the other person usually catches on and, the dance then changes, right? So, as I said, unless someone's abusive, unless somebody is really off, it's enough if one person's differentiating and not going down the unhealthy path and just saying, hey, I'm not going to get into an argument with you because it's not going to work. Hey, I want to talk. If you want to talk, let's talk it out in a healthy way. If one person's regulating, if one person's pulling that stuff together, I've seen incredible things happen.
But is it also said that someone who's doing work and they're getting and the other one's not, they're just getting further and further apart in a way? And
It,
or is it that
again,
someone's doing the work so they become more accepting, but they are further apart, but they just become more accepting of the differences?
So again, as I said, if, as long as the other person's not out to lunch, right? If one person is doing a lot of work, there tend to be better times between the two of them, right? Things calm down because it takes, two to fight. If the other person is not fighting, then things do tend to calm down. And so what ends up happening is the gap it could be wider in the beginning, and then it starts to lessen, right? Because what created the big balagan, the mess, was both people's stuff, right? I'll give an example of a couple who, when I met them, they were separated, and they were heading towards divorce, and it was bad. Like when I met them, I mean, they were fighting like cats and dogs. It was intense, right? And I just went right in there with the differentiation and started to teach them and he really got it. Like he got it. She has a lot more impulsive stuff and ADHD stuff, and it was a lot harder for her to grab onto the differentiation, but he did. He got it. And things started to change in their marriage because he stopped going there with her. He stopped reacting and their fights calmed down. I got to, when I met them, their 12-year-old used to disappear. As soon as they started to argue, he would run and hide and lock himself in the room, right? So the whole thing turned around. But first, the husband really got the dance. He got the differentiation. He changed the dance. He stopped going there. And I said to him at one point, I said, "Whoa, you've got this." And he says, "Yeah. Well, what really clinched it for me was the one sentence that you said." And I said, "What was it?" He said, "You said you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to." And he said, "I didn't realize I had a choice." Every time she would yell at me or call me names, I would just go right back in. So he was really differentiating, and then as he was more consistent, then she started to notice, whoa, he's showing up differently, and I better pull myself together. And then she was open to exploration more of her impulsivity, and maybe she needs some medication, and it turned around like that. But good 2, 3 years there, 4 years of not 4 years, but 2, 3 years of working the system like that before things could really um, get better in terms of both of them. But it took him getting really clear and consistent and in the beginning he kept saying like, well, how come I'm doing this and she's not, and then once he got over that, he's like, I'm doing it because I'm doing it, and I'm doing it for me, I'm doing it for us, I'm doing it for our kids, and then she started to catch on. Yeah.
So I'm just curious now. I mean, here you gave an example of the husband. Is it really equally the man would do start, or the woman, or it's still,
it
or either, or still
I
some
think
do?
most of the time it's women who start because to quote Dr. Laura Schlesinger, right, she always said, when it comes to relationships, women rule, right? Like we have the relationship wisdom, we have that relationship tenacity, we have the nuances, we hop like, well, we catch, we pick up all these different things. So and we're more flexible, right? We're more flexible, and so I mean, we're flexible emotionally. Women are flexible enough to get pregnant, to have baby. It's our whole being has a lot more flexibility built into it. And so it's oftentimes the woman who's going to be the one who's paving the way in the relationship, and not always, as I said. But as long as one person is doing it, um, what you end up having when you're doing it that way, and one person's, and I certainly did it in my marriage, I certainly led the way. And as much as like there's sometimes you're like, hey, how come I have to do most of the work right now? There's also this sense of, wow, I'm really growing into myself, and so it feels great. And it's like, wow, I've so much more regulated. I'm just my ability to create that inner happiness. It feels great. And so that's what keeps us going while we're waiting for our other half to come along.
So am I maybe making this up, but if the man starts, then it might be easier for the eventually for the woman to pick up because she is more flexible or more in tune. Like if he just gets it started,
Yeah,
will it roll faster?
it depends. I find that the men who are actually more quick to change are married to women who are slower to change. It just,
It just is how Hashem said.
yeah, that's just the way it is. Yeah. But yeah, as long as we understand the road trip and understand the process and clear out like these ridiculous myths that we pick up from Hollywood, really, about the way it's supposed to look. Um, the process of love and building love is so deep and so profound and so fulfilling, but it's very different than what it looks like on the screen and on Hollywood, right? And I always say, I on a personal level, what's more fulfilling than our own personal growth process? As difficult it is as it is, and we sometimes we know we hit a certain level in our growth, and we're like, okay, I'm good, and then like, come on, enough, like this has been hard enough, and then like the next challenge comes, it's like, what again? I gotta get to my next level. But as we grow through our growth process, we're grateful each time that we get challenged because then we get higher and we get higher. And I think that when we look back at our lives and what we want is to have really made something out of ourselves. And that only happens with, understanding the challenges can take us further. And so when we understand the growth process and how beautiful it is and how profound it is and how worth it's so worthwhile, so um, then then not only is our own personal process profound and beautiful, then marriage also becomes that way. Even if we're the ones who are starting the process, even if we're the ones who sometimes, a few steps ahead in terms of growth, it, it's very fulfilling.
I'm just wondering if we go through the differentiation and we realize that we are separate people, which we are, do we maybe run into the realizing that we're so different, that we really are, our values are different and what we want is so different, and maybe some people will have a problem with the idea of people finding out that they are so different. Like, like what I'm going at is like people say get them married young and let them grow together, but when they
Mm.
actually hit the point of discovering that they are so very different and they individuate, is that possibly debunking or ruining that let them grow together thing?
Oh, they're not different. I don't use the word individuate, right? I'm talking about it's differentiating means taking responsibility for ourselves, right? For the for the purpose of the closeness, right? It's not individuating. It's those four things that I mentioned. It's owning our own regulating ourselves and changing ourselves. It's validating ourselves instead of waiting for someone else to do it for us. It's making ourselves, it's owning our own inner happiness and learning how to not to run away, right? Those are differentiation tools for the purpose of closeness.
Mhm.
Differentiation it's maintaining oneself so that we can stay close, right? When someone individuates, then they can grow farther away. That's not what I'm talking about in my book,
Right.
right?
I
I'm
think when
talking,
people hear that word, like finding out, figuring out that you, or discovering that you're so different, may make people be afraid that they are indeed so different, like irreconcilable differences, or
well,
or very, very difficult differences.
look, I mean, I wrote my first book is a dating book, and there I say when you're dating, you're looking for shared values, right? And we want to make sure that our when we're dating that our basic values do match up. That being said, there's going to be a lot of values that don't match up because not, they can't all match up, right?
Right.
So we're going to find values that don't match. Okay. And when we start to notice how different we are, um, we want to also acknowledge that we have a lot of similarities when we got married with our own, you know, with common goals in mind, right? When I say noticing how different we are, um, what what happens is that even though we have a lot of similarities, those differences they sort of take over and then we get blindsided by them. So when we regulate ourselves, then we can appreciate those differences, right? Uh, Now, if a couple didn't not date smart and they never were on the same page with any of their values, those are difficult marriages. That but in the Jewish world, there tends to be already some basic similarities because people tend to be getting married with the purpose of getting married, right? That's already a value, right? Family is usually already a value. So, um, religion or spirituality is on some level is already a value. So you're already starting with some really important values that are shared, right? And and again, the differentiation isn't noticing our differences. Differentiation is what to do once we notice them,
Mm-hmm. We're talking
right?
a little bit more about different styles rather than very different values.
Yeah, yeah, and again, there are going to be like you'll see in the book, there's different values that pop up. Like, oh wait, you want to keep the baby and do attachment, mothering. No, I thought we'd let the baby sleep in a separate room and cry it out, right? There's those. That's an example of a values clash. And what I show there is that there's a technique of holding two different opinions, and it's interesting because the great writer F. Scott Fitzgerald, he once said the test of a first-rate intelligence is to hold two opposed ideas at the same time and still retain the ability to function, right? Holding two opposed ideas. Remember, as I said, this is what children can't do. Two opposed ideas and still retain the ability to function. And that means, oh, so you want to bring up the kids this way, and I want to bring up the kids this way. And instead of like having to fight it out, it's let me maintain what I think and be open to let me try to understand you, where you're coming from. And that curiosity and that acceptance, now we can try to come up with a solution as a team rather than, fighting. So, yeah, so even though we shared basic values, we are going to have to work through other values that we don't share, and that's part of marriage. Dr. John Gottman says every couple has about 69% of their issues that are not resolvable.
Right.
It's a lot. The best couples, the happiest couples, and the most miserable couples all have about 69% of our issues that are not resolvable. So what's that? Well, that means that the better we are at regulating ourselves and hearing the other person, being curious and accepting, the better we can work with those, irreconcilable differences. Because that concept of irreconcilable differences is very much a catchphrase and an excuse that when divorce started to become a thing in the world, that became like the catchphrase for, oh, we have irreconcilable differences. Most couples have lots of irreconcilable differences. That's just the reality, and it's okay.
I
It's
think we have
okay.
irreconcilable differences between ourselves. And different days we feel like doing different
Yeah.
things.
That's right. Or different parts of ourselves wants, there's part of us that wants to go out and have fun, and there's a part of us that wants to stay home and be a homey. There's a part of us that wants to grow and become, more evolved. And there's a part of us that just wants to chill out and just not do anything, right? We have lots of different differences within ourselves and different parts. But
What I loved about this book is that it really that awareness. I think the overall for me, and I think for a lot of the people that I know, there's the awareness that this is going to happen, and this is how we can deal with it. And everyone, and you have lots of tools in the appendix, so that was really also really great. And again, like I said, lots of rabbit holes to go through if you want to know more. So this is really a great book. So it's called
are we there yet? Are we there yet? Which is like really that child in us. It's like, are we there yet? Right. And it's is to really understand that it's a process, that marriage is a process. And if we understand that, then we can enjoy the process and we can enjoy the journey and enjoy the road trip because, right, when we go on a road trip, we can either like, are we there yet? Or we could be saying, hey, look at how beautiful this is. Wow, look at sunset. And, where are we going tomorrow? And enjoy the journey.
in our family, as we get lost, we call it as taking the scenic route. And we bump into some interesting places that we wouldn't have taken if we would
That's
have just
cute.
gone down the highway. So
Yeah.
we enjoy the scenic route sometimes. Longer, but scenic.
Scenic. Start
Yeah.
to discover the
So
world.
where can we find your book?
Well, it's on Amazon. It's in
The Jewish
in,
book.
in America. It's in the Jewish bookstores, and in Israel, it's in every bookstore. From Stamatsky to the more religious bookstores, and yeah, it's I'm excited. I'm excited about you know the ability for this book to help people, and when you're writing a book, it's very daunting because you realize that once it's in print, you can't change it, and it's out there. And so what you end up doing is just really doing a lot of prayer and just like, God, let this help people, please. If there's something I'm saying that's not clear, please let me see it because I only want this to help. And so I would say that is my prayer, that this is my offering, and that God willing, it's really going to help lots and lots of couples to achieve that fulfilling, thriving marriage.
And where can people find you if they want to reach out to you? You have your own website?
Yeah, ChanaLevitan.com, and love to hear
Levitan with
from
an A.
everybody. Sorry?
Levitan with an A, not
Correct.
Levitan. So like this.
Right, Levitan.
Right.
Yes.
And I'll also put the links in the show notes in the bottom, so that if anyone wants to reach out to any of those, I'll put the link to Amazon and to your
Yeah,
website.
great.
And
That'd be
anything else that
great.
you'll give me, I'll put down there too.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you so
Thank you
much.
so much,
Wow.
Chana. Great book.
Thanks, Ron. I love what you're doing, and really such a pleasure to meet you and to have this time together.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And good night. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. And if you're looking for more relationship and marriage insights, check out our website and check out our Jot, Just One Thing from Adai Ad. These are short, powerful tips that we share a few times a week on WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook. They're bite-sized ideas to help you build stronger and healthier connections. And now, many of these jots are available in book form, and you can find all 3 volumes on Amazon or through our website at adaiad.org/books. That's ADAIAD.org/books. The books are Communicate to Connect, Stronger Me, Stronger We, and Better Words When It Matters Most. You can get the jots directly to your phone, and you can subscribe at adaiad.org, ADAIAD.org/just-one-thing. And until next time, wishing you strong, lasting, and meaningful relationships.